finally, we have come to our performance task piece. For this performance task, we have set you guys up for success. If we scroll on down to this page, we have a Google Slides template. So how do we open this? Well, first we're going to click on the yellow. It's going to open up a tab and it's going to ask us, do you want to make a copy? We're going to say yeah. So make a copy. And we give it a second to load, and then voila. You now have your very own template for this performance task. Please be sure at the top to change this gobbledygook to your name so your teacher knows who you are, who's this for. For my example, we're just going to have it be Alpha, just for fun. But please, please, please make sure to change it to your name. For this activity, we are giving you a template. So it's designed to help you research and go through and fill out information. So you are going to be awesome at this performance task. But what are you researching? Well, let's take a look at our packet. What you're going to be researching is one genetic disorder in which that disorder is going to affect something about how the body functions. Either how a protein is folded, or maybe how an enzyme is made or missing. So there are many, many different options. You only need to pick one. So once you've settled on an option, what you're going to do is you're going to go to our template. And first things first, you're going to type the disease name on slide number 1. Second thing, you're going to put your name, please. For slide number 2, this is where your research starts. So if you, for instance, were to pick hemophilia, what you would do is you need to research what that disease is and what are some symptoms if somebody is experiencing that disorder. So let's take a look for an example, and let's do Krebs disease. So if we take a look, notice how your websites either have a .org, a .gov, or even maybe a .com. So for us, we need to pick some very reputable sources. So reputable or repute means it has some trustworthiness to it. Normally the .govs and the .orgs, fairly trustworthy. The .coms are hit or miss. So if we take a look here, I have one that's a .gov. So let's see what this one says about Krebs disease. So here we have a neurological condition where the lining on nerve cells is destroyed. And so these myelin sheaths are sort of like insulators for our nerve cells, allowing them to send signals faster. However, if you have Krebs disease, this insulator is decayed and destroyed. It's not there on these cells. So, what are some symptoms? Signs and symptoms typically include irritability, muscle weakness, feeding difficulties, fevers, but no sign of infection, and so on and so forth. So we're going to pick 2 to 3 symptoms, and we're going to include them in our performance task. For the other one, negative effects on the body, well, we can discuss that, well, the myelin sheath is lost, and it's also causing a specific type of cell to be abnormal in the brain, which can cause muscle weakness, affecting an infant's ability to move, chew, swallow, and eventually breathe. So all those things are affecting how the body is functioning. So we can write some of those down for negative effects on the body. For our next slide, what we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out, well, who is more susceptible to this disease? Is it males, females, a certain ethnicity, a certain age group. So for my specific example, for Krebs disease, notice how we keep going to infants. So let's see if we have a group of individuals that are more susceptible to this disease, or excuse me, this disorder. So frequency in the United States affects about 1 in 100,000 individuals. We got some statistics right there. And it looks like it begins in childhood, adolescence, or early adulthood. But most of the time we find it in infants. So all that information we can totally use for our next slide. But what's responsible for this? What is causing this disorder? Well, let's see. Is this a really good website and has all this information? I think it is. Causes? Awesome. So we need to figure out what gene is causing this disorder. Well, they spell it out for us. Mutations of the GALC gene cause Krebs disease. All right, so what are these mutations? We're going to figure out, is it causing a protein to not function correctly? Or in this case, reduces the activity of a specific enzyme. So this enzyme is something that is supposed to break down this and this. But because it's not functioning correctly, and that enzyme isn't breaking down these two types of molecules, it is causing damage to our myelin cells, our nerve cells. So for that, we can totally talk about this slide. So it's not so much a protein. So if you run across this, we can put enzyme instead. So that's okay. No biggie. Cool. So we have a specific enzyme, which is just basically a collection of proteins anyway. So we can report about that, and we're going to need a picture. So first and foremost, before we leave this website, let's make sure we cite it, because we are going to need a citation page as well. And then so if we want to find a picture of that enzyme, we're just going to research it. So most of the time, this is probably going to be computer generated looking things, and that's okay. Oh, hey, here it is. So here we have an image showing exactly what that enzyme is doing. Cool. So we have lots of different options to show us either how the enzyme is supposed to work or how it's not working when we have this disorder. From there, our fifth slide, we're just going to get in more detail. So we may need to research this specific gene to help us understand exactly what went wrong. Where in the gene sequence or in the allele sequences are we having an error? Next, we're going to figure out what type of inheritance is this disorder. Inheritance. Oh, this website's the best. So for us, we see here that it is inherited as an autosomal recessive. So recessive, remember, if it's also with an allele that's a dominant, so normal enzyme producing, we're not going to have this trait seen. We're not going to have that phenotype of not making our enzyme. If this was an autosomal dominant, then if you have that dominant allele in either alleles, you will have this disorder. Autosomal just means it's on a chromosome that is not sex-linked. So it's not on an X chromosome and it's not on a Y chromosome. All right. So we can totally use this information to help us answer that slide. Genotypes. Ooh, so here we're looking at the genetics of those alleles. So for that, we may need to do some outside research. All right, so here we have several groups that talk about the mutations of this gene. So probably any of these are going to be super helpful. So some of them you may have to do a little skimming, and that's okay. Research is helpful. All right, well, here we also are given some information about the phenotypes. We can use this information to help us answer our next slide, phenotype. And finally, we have to research if there's any treatments and if there's actually a cure or if there's not a cure. And then, of course, don't forget to cite your sources as we go through each of your websites and are collecting data or pictures. Please make sure to cite your sources. So remember, all you need to do is copy their URL, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. If you need help in knowing how to share your performance task with your supervising teacher, let's take a look at that real quick. So on your performance task, you're just going to go to the big share button on the top. And then right here, you're just going to type in your supervising teacher's name. Once you have their name, you're just going to hit send and you got it shared. Nice. All right, guys. So with that, that is going to conclude our packet. That was just a nice little overview of what to do with your performance task. It's fairly straightforward if you're using your template. Okay? If you guys run into any questions or concerns, if you need to go back to the video at any time and rewind it, relook at stuff, study for the quiz. So guys, we just got our whole packet done. Thank you guys so much for your time.